Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, July 19, 2022 meeting of the Edina City Council. Some of you are in the audience, and that's terrific to have you with us this evening. And some are watching possibly on cable TV or at edinamn.gov live meetings or on Facebook. If you are going to come in and talk to us remotely, you want to participate in either a public hearing or community comment, you're going to call 888-504-7949. That number should show up on the screen here pretty quick. Enter participant passcode 955-866, 955-866. And then you can speak to the council, give the operator your name and your address. Press star 1 on your telephone keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak, and Director Boulevard will bring you in to speak to the council. So we'll come up fairly quickly on community comments, so keep that number in mind or write it down at home if you want to call in and talk to the council about a matter that's not on the agenda tonight or scheduled for a future public hearing. Having provided that information, we'll call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Sharon Allison, to do the roll.
Councilmember Anderson?
Here.
Councilmember Jackson? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Jackson is absent. Councilmember Pierce?
Here.
Councilmember Staunton?
Here.
Mayor Hovland?
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody. We've got a form of meeting agenda in front of us this evening. Our colleague, Carolyn Jackson, is missing from the meeting. There was a matter that she wanted to be able to participate in. And I think, Manager Neal, if we look at Roman 9E, proposed ordinance 2021-07, off-street parking regulations, I understand that we could potentially pull that from the agenda and deal with that at our first meeting in August.
Yes, Your Honor, that's true, and we have verified with the presenters of that ordinance, both staff and commission, and they are available that night to do it.
Okay. All right, then let me ask my colleagues if there's a motion to amend the agenda to move the item 9E to the August 3rd meeting, I believe it is, so 2022.
Second.
All right, got a motion and second to amend the agenda to move item 9E to our August 3rd meeting and then otherwise approve the amended agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye. 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 Opposed? Carried. All right, we've got that agenda issue dealt with, and now we're going to go on to community comments. So again, folks, 888-504-7949 and the participant code 955-866. Press star 1 on your telephone keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak, and the operator there will bring you into Director Boulevard, and Director Boulevard will bring you to the council. Are you showing anyone? Well, let's go first to folks in the audience. Let's do that first. You drove all the way down here to City Hall, and give us your name and address, please, and tell us what you're concerned about.
So my name is Alyssa Movern. I live at 5005 West 56th Street in the Melody Lake neighborhood. So Mayor Hovland and the council, I'm here tonight to share my disappointment in the lack of communication with turf application on our side after the sidewalks and boulevards were installed in October 2021. So it is best practice in most professions to follow research-based methods, and I expect the same would go for turf applications. So I looked at the U of M extension site, which gives a variety of best practices for turf. So I think that there's a couple areas where the city failed. So I'll go over those. So as far as preparing the site, prior to the application, there was you want to make sure that there are no weeds. So that was not the case. The weeds should be removed at the root, and this didn't happen. They only used a weed whipper, which was used where the weeds were so well established that they were somewhere up to 2 feet high. There was crabgrass, quackgrass, marijuana plants, and a variety of other weeds. And then also seed. So the seed should be laid in late August or September. This didn't happen. It was laid at the hottest time of the year, June 24th. Okay, and then also the moisture is critical for new sod or new seed. After seed is laid, it should be watered to a depth of 4 to 6 inches. And then after that, 3 to 4 times per day after. This did not happen. The contractor started watering on July 12th. That was 2.5 weeks after they laid the seed. And then after that, they also watered, I think, yesterday and today. So by that time, the weeds had already eclipsed any possible potential growth from the seed, the grass seed. So here's where you come in. Drive by our neighborhood, please. Ask yourself, would you accept the application that is in our front lawn? If not, I ask that you insist that the turf is redone, using the best practices that I shared with you. So the weeds are removed at the roots prior to laying the seed. The seed is laid in late August or September, and then that watering is done per the recommendations of the U of M extension program. All right, and then as far as the communication goes, communicating to our residents directly, maybe with a letter on their door or even an email. Not everybody checks the Better Together site, so that would be one option. And then this is actually the second time that the city has installed grass seed on our property, lucky us, in the past 14 years. And I have to say that the communication from this time, compared to the last time, has been significantly deteriorated. So just looking at that as a process from the city, how you can make it better. And I'll end there. Thank you.
So,
Thank you for your
and
time.
then are you on West 56th?
Yes.
I'll be out there Thursday morning at 9:30 at Chris Raffadell's house. If you want to,
Perfect.
if you know where he lives,
Yes,
I'll be there.
he lives right down the street from us.
And then
Yeah.
I'll go to West 58th Street, I
West
think. So-
56th, yep.
Yeah, but 58th also has issues. So.
Oh, yeah, well, you'll
I'll
see it.
come out and
You don't
get
have to
the,
go look very far.
Yeah, and I think Director Milner will share some information here tonight, too.
Okay, all right,
Thanks,
thank
Ms.
you.
Mulvern, for coming in.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the audience wish to address the council on a matter of concern to them that's not on the agenda or otherwise scheduled for a future public hearing? Yes, welcome.
How could I be here and not take an opportunity to make a comment here? I'm Arnie Bigby, live at 7621 Edinburgh Way South in Edina, west of Edina. I just wanted to acknowledge the entire council and city staff for what the community has done for Juneteenth celebration. And Mayor, your follow-up letter in the Sun Current, I think that's a great start. And our community has just put out a welcoming mat that is extraordinary, as Edina is well able to do. And I just look forward to future opportunities for this community to be welcoming to everyone. It's just a great example of what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bigby. Anyone else in the audience? Do we have anybody online, Director Benarott?
We do have one caller on the line. Operator, will you please unmute the caller's line? And then caller, please begin by stating your full name and address for the record.
Andrew Brown, 5512 Park Place in Edina. Just calling to see where things stand with the pedestrian bridge across 62 that is damaged and been closed off by MnDOT. Where that stands as far as a replacement, not just a fix or a temporary fix. And then the second thing is where things stand on a third fire station, one for North and Northeast Edina, especially with all the public safety issues that are creeping in from Minneapolis, as Minneapolis now only has between 18 and 20 officers patrolling the whole city on a night shift, according to the Star Tribune. So would really like to see some follow-up and some devotion in the CIP to those type issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I have no other callers at this time.
All right. All right. Typically, we turn to the city manager to deal with issues that came up 2 weeks before or at the prior meeting. But I think we can deal with a couple of these issues right now. And I think West 56th Street, those turf applications, Director Milner, do you want to comment on what we have for a strategy in mind over there?
Yeah, to be honest, we're struggling with the contractor. So those those key points that the resident stated, that's our specifications, and they're not following them. So we are struggling to get them to follow that. But they are planning to come back mid-August through the end of September and work through that ideal time frame to make those corrections. So that's occurring at that point for both the streets that you referenced, 56th and portions of 58th.
And how about the weed killing that she mentioned?
Yep, they've been doing they're spraying using herbicides to kill off the weeds prior to any of their working of that soil, and additional topsoil and seeding coming in the mid-August timeframe.
All right. I'll let you know what I learn on Thursday, too, about whether the weed whip is an adequate substitute for an herbicide.
And is that
Remember something?
is that a separate contractor just for the turf replacement, or is it the street contractor?
We have both happening right now, and it's, again, we haven't seen who holds the contract isn't impacting the performance either way. So we've kicked one contractor off and tried a second and a third contractor, and we're struggling to find anybody that'll even come in and do the work. They are so short on labor. The drought's affecting the quality of the topsoil. We're not the only city with marijuana plants and weed plants in their topsoil, so this is a statewide issue right now.
Maybe we could put a moratorium on them. I'm just kidding.
Yep.
Little levity, sorry.
Maybe we could get somebody to harvest the marijuana plants in exchange for doing the turf work.
There you go. So we've talked about this on a number of occasions over the years, and I'm always trying to figure out how the best way to tackle it is. And it sounds like we've tried, because originally we had just the contractor who was doing the street work was responsible for this. And then it sounds like we've tried some separate contractors just to do the turf replacement, and we're struggling with that.
So we're looking at all options, and we plan to bring something forward before the public hearing for next year's projects. We have some ideas how we can provide maybe more materials and ask residents to do the watering, but potentially give credit on water bills.
Okay.
And we are looking, again, at considering sod, to be honest with you.
Right.
Look at the triple bottom line. If all this rework is costing us so much money, is it worth
Right,
doing
and it's
seed?
a shame because we do such great work right up until the last, it's not the last mile, it's the last 6 inches, and then we leave a bad taste in people's mouths.
We're going to bring some ideas back to the
All
council
right,
later
and
this
then
year.
we'll fix this as well.
Correct.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks.
Ms. Mover, and I'll talk to you on Thursday morning. Since we've,
question, why wouldn't we know that there's herbicide being put down? Like, I have kids out there.
yeah, we don't, yeah, the public hearing portion of it is closed up now, but if you want to, yeah, okay. Or the public comment period, I should say. No, I think also Director Milner, the pedestrian bridge across the crosstown, I think we got a problem there too, or MnDOT had an issue with trying to find a contractor. Is that still the status on that?
That is, they went out for bids and nobody bid on the repair of the bridge. So they're still trying to find contractors that are willing to repair it. The comment from the resident was, when are we going to replace it? Well, that's a whole different conversation. And MnDOT and the city are looking up for opportunities, looking for grant funding we'd love to have an ADA compliant bridge at that location, but there's no updates on that at this point.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm going to turn now to Manager Neal to see if there's anything he wanted to comment on regarding community comments that have been made at the last meeting.
We do, thank you, Your Honor. We did have one comment made at the June 21st meeting, and if you'll recall, that was Mr. Don Johansson from the Manor Homes, and the issue was whether or not they could have natural gas grills on their wooden decks. And there, as I checked in with the fire chief today, that issue is still being processed, right? So the fire department is meeting with the HOA leadership and working through what's happening on the ground and whether or not they comply for an exception under our fire code. So it is not resolved at this point, but is working toward resolution.
All right, good, thank you for that. All right, let's move on to the next portion of the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the council that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as published?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Staunton, second by Member Pierce to approve the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda items are approved. On to special recognitions and presentations, and we have a new city management fellow, and I'm going to turn now to Manager Neal to introduce our new city management fellow.
Thank you, Your Honor. And if Jillian would like to come up, I want to introduce you to Jillian Straub. Jillian is our new city management fellow. She started a couple of weeks ago. As you know, our fellows are here for 2 years, and our most recent fellow, Reese Kareem, is working for the city of Northfield now, and so we're happy to have Jillian join our team. Jillian?
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Neal. Like he said, my name is Jillian Straub. I'm from Eastern Iowa, Davenport, but I was most recently in Lawrence, Kansas, where I started my Master's of Public Administration degree. I'll finish that up this year in May. And that's also my first introduction to local government, interning in the city manager's office there. Before that, I had worked at a college newspaper, in the U.S. Embassy in Pristina, and then as a proxy advising analyst. So I'm very excited to be here in the city of Edina. As was mentioned, I've only been here for a couple of weeks, but I already know there's so much I can learn from the staff as well as the elected body and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Straub. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. Next matter in this portion of the agenda is Affordable Housing Progress Report by Stephanie Hawkinson, our Affordable Housing Development Manager.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Yes, good evening. Yes, thanks for being here.
Okay, this is not working. It's not advancing. There you go. Maybe if I turned it on, it would work better. That's what the green means. As you know, I like to start presentations with providing some grounding. Why are we worried about affordable housing? And the reason for looking at affordable housing is codified in our comprehensive plan, our race and equity report, our equity statement, and engagement. So these are some of the grounding principles for the work that has been done by the HRA and the City Council in the past. Well, this report covers from 2015 forward, so the past 7 years. Before I get into what we have accomplished, we need to talk about some of the context in which this work occurred. And the housing prices in Edina have been increasing. And this slide shows where the cost of housing is in Edina compared to other communities. This is not necessarily bad. In fact, I think some people would think this is a great thing. You know, they buy a home in the city, it's a good investment, and they're going to get a return. So this is not to say anything about that. It's just housing costs are increasing. What's not shown in the graph is that the 2021, the average assessed value of a home was $698,000, and in 2022 was $797,800. This is the average assessed value. So in 1 year, the assessed value, the average value increased by over $100,000. Housing prices in Edina are continuing to rise. So the need for affordable housing, when you look through the old files, you can see it in newspaper articles dated back decades. More recently, there was this citizen-driven. We do our semi-annual surveys, and it comes up pretty consistently that there is an interest in creating and preserving affordable housing in the city. It's data-driven. Prior to the pandemic, we knew that over 40,000 people were traveling into the city each day for work, and that we knew that 44% of Edina renters were cost-burdened. And it's mandate-driven. The Metropolitan Council has affordable housing goals, and they're reflected in our comprehensive plan. And so for the new comprehensive plan, that was approved, there was a goal of 1,804 new affordable units to be introduced into the city by 2030. So we also, here's some graphs that you've seen before, but I think they're very telling. When you look back on the graph on the left, this compares minimum wage with the average price, the income required to buy the average priced home in Edina. So I don't think there's any delusions that we're going to try to have every minimum age earner to buy a home in the city, but it's just to show that over time, in 1985, it was conceivable that a two-person household where both were earning minimum wage, they could conceivably buy a home in Edina in 1985. In 2022, there's no way. I mean, the gap between that wage and the cost of housing, or the income you need to buy a home in the city, has just grown. The graph to the right, the blue line on top, is the wage that you would need to buy the average priced home in Edina between 2020 and 2019. I like to point out the yellow line in 2020 is a city worker or a government administration, and could have bought a home in 2020. And the gap there has even grown for these are the largest employers in Edina, and the gap has grown between what the average wages are and what the cost of housing is. So people that work in Edina, being able to buy a home is getting farther and farther out of reach. For the 2020 comprehensive plan, we had a goal of creating 212 new affordable units. In that time period, 100% of the new housing that was affordable was rental. No ownership, is all rental. 7% of new rental housing was affordable. And then 0% affordable options were ownership. So the graph on the right, the yellow is market rate housing. And the blue line, there was a blip in 2016 where some affordable rental property was created. And I think that was 66 West is reflected in that. So by 2015, I think, I wasn't here, but my understanding is that the city council said we need to up our game. It's not happening naturally in the marketplace. It's not occurring just by us stating that there's a need. So you created an affordable housing policy for new multifamily development. In 2018, you added the buy-in option that gave some flexibility for developers. If it just was not feasible to include the affordable housing in their units, in their building, they could buy in. 2019, you added the affirmative marketing and non-discrimination of housing choice vouchers into the policy. In 2019, you also created a policy guide to help developers. And in 2021, you reduced the cap of what it is for ownership housing to align better with the Metropolitan Council, and you increased the buy-in amount. The map on the left are the multifamily affordable housing in the city. So the light blue dots are NOAA properties. The red are 100% affordable. The green are multifamily that include the affordable option. Get my notes together. So here are other policy initiatives that have been passed since 2015. You hired an affordable housing development manager. Thank you very much. Gave me a job. You adopted the SAC-WAC fee reduction ordinance. So for affordable housing that align with Metropolitan Council allows for reduction in that fee if certain conditions are met. Ours mirrors that. You approved a fair housing policy, and you created Open Doors Edina. In 2019, we created the policy guide. You proactively acquired land to promote affordable housing. You adopted the Affordable Housing Trust Fund ordinance. I don't know what that for is. I apologize for the typo. You created a Housing Strategy Task Force. 2020, you adopted a new multifamily affordable housing ordinance because the policy, you had the policy covered projects where there needed to be a PUD or they asked for money. There are certain situations where the land was guided for the project being proposed, and so the ordinance covers other projects, specifically in the Southdale area. You approved rental licensure and the Housing Strategy Task Force implementation report. And then 2021, we adopted the tenant protection ordinance and we adopted the housing improvement area policy. So a lot of activities have been occurred since 2015. So here are some of the projects that have occurred since 2015. These are the developments that fall under the policy with regarding to including affordable units. This table does not reflect those that did buy-in. So of the projects that complied with including the affordable housing, 1,183 units were created, new affordable units. Of those, 332 are affordable. And that includes 100% affordable as well as the inclusionary. So the comp plan that we're in now starts at 2020. So the number of affordable units that have been approved that apply against the goals in the comp plan are 293. The number that has been delivered thus far is 135. So in the market rate developments, so not looking at the 100% affordable developments, there are 82 affordable units in market rate developments, and that's 7%. And the number of units bought in since the policy was approved is 117. Diving into that a little further, so the buy-in, we had the Fred 1 in lieu of 41 units, Bauer in lieu of 19, the U.S. Bank 7001 France in lieu of 27 units, Lorient in lieu of 2, Valley View in lieu of 3, and the Loden in lieu of 25. And in inclusion, the Perkins site, they're including 20 units. The Rise on 77th is including 20 units. The Lorient they did a split, so they included 3. Avador 18, Millennium 11, and Nolan Main's 10. So that's where those numbers come from. So here's a map of where the affordable housing, multifamily affordable housing is. In the blue are those projects that are 100% affordable. And all of these three have been created since 2015. Cornelia View is just underway, and the Sound at Amundsen Flats. And then the other ones were on the table before that have the inclusionary, that including affordable units because of the policy that was approved in 2015. So they're not all concentrated. There is some geographical diversity of where these are occurring, although they tend to be on the east side. So these are the 100% affordable. 4100 Edina, we just had the grand opening. So 70 units in this development, and we use TIF and TIF pooling. We heard the other day, they had in the first couple days over 400 applicants for these 70 units and 7,000 inquiries. The Sound. Amundsen Flats, 62 units. We use TIF pooling. They received more applications in this project than they had in any of their previous projects, even projects that were opening at the same time. Cornelia View they're undergoing abatement right now. So this is 118 units of age-restricted affordable housing, and TIF pooling were used. It's not only multifamily rental. You have also made some strides in the ownership arena. So between 2008 and 2020, 1,053 single-family permits were issued. The average home value of the teardowns in that time period was $427,000. The average cost of the rebuilds was $1.2 million, an increase of 182%. To respond to this and support Homes Within Reach and Metro HRA programs, a postcard was sent to every house with an assessed value of up to $425, and we said there is an option out there. If you're selling your home, you can put it on the market, sell it the traditional way. You can, some developers are pretty assertive and let people know that they will buy their homes as is for a tear down, but some people want their homes preserved, but they don't want to go through the hassle of also staging it. And so they have approached me about wanting to sell their home into a program for preservation. And we talked about this at the most recent HRA meeting as well. So with the single family preservation, $3.3 million line of credit was approved for Homes Within Reach. So far, 7 homes have been acquired. 5 families have moved into finished homes and have made Edina their home. All of them have children. And 1 purchase is pending. Metro HRA, they were awarded $2 million for givable loan, and they have acquired 4 homes. 2 of them are still being renovated. There were more issues with that home than they anticipated, so it's taking longer to get the renovation done. But the 2 are being occupied. Their home ownership rehabilitation program, you recently awarded an additional $500,000 for a total of $1.5 million. There are 34 closed loans, and there's still interest. They still get a lot of inquiries from people that are income eligible, and their home value is eligible of under $425, and they are able to get a low interest loan with the option for forgiveness if at the end of the day they want to sell it into one of our programs. So there is a need out there, and it also goes to show there's 35 applicants of people that own homes, existing homes that are valued at less than $425. So these homes are out there. And then what recently approved, we don't have contracts yet, is the Emerging Developer Pilot Program, which will also be in partnership with Homes Within Reach and LISC. And we're hoping to get 4 homes out of that. So here's the table of where we are with relation to our comprehensive plan. We approved, we are 16.8% there. The highest income bracket that has been approved is at the 50%, and that's 31.3. And I believe that that's because of the inclusion or policy, where if they have 10% of the units at 50% of area median income, that complies with our policy. And I think that is more appealing than doing 20% at 60%. The 30% units are all in the 100% affordable housing projects. So then we also have the Edina Housing Foundation. So over about $6.5 million of mortgage notes have been originated since 2008, or 2007, excuse me. 136 households have benefited from this program. And we have a closing next week. So the average home was valued at $220,000. So this is for condominiums and single-family homes. So that program is spread far and wide in the city. Recently, last fall, the foundation approved the first generation home buying program, which is in addition to the $60,000 they can get from the Come Home to Edina program, a borrower can receive, is $15,000 if they are first generation. They did not grow up in a home that was owned by their parent or guardian. And thus far, we have closed 3 of these first generation loans. and they are forgiven after 15 years. So here's the overall map of where there's affordable housing with all our programs in the city. This does show affordability in all 4 quadrants. If I did an overlay of the Comcast program and of the housing rehab program, there would be a lot more dots, and it would show even greater disbursement. So the challenges that we have as we move forward. 93% of the existing residential land use is for single-family housing. Land available for multifamily housing is located primarily in the southeast quadrant. So things to think about is concentration of affordable housing, income disparities within the city, and impact of schools in that area. And the availability or lack thereof of land for redevelopment and the basic land costs. And that's my presentation for today.
Thank you, very informative. Nice that you do this for us annually. Questions or comments from council members? Anyone? Yeah. Thank you for that presentation this evening. All right, we're going to move on in the agenda now to the public hearing portion of it. We have 2 public hearings this evening, both school district related matters, and Carrie Teague, our Community Development Director, has both of those matters. And these are both matters that we will take public testimony on this evening and then hold the public hearing open until noon on July 25th, and then continue the action of the August 3rd City Council meeting, which is the recommendation of staff. So Director Teague, do you want to take up the first matter, which is involves Countryside Elementary School?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this property is located on Tracy Avenue. It's a quick aerial shot of it, the intersection of Benton and Tracy. What the school district is proposing here is to build 6 classroom additions, highlighted in red on the screen, and expand their parking lot located on the east side of the building. The idea here, the purpose of the expanded parking lot is to redirect traffic and have a more safe situation between the buses, parent drop-off, and staff parking on the site. So this is a look at the existing configuration. In the blue dashed line, this is the parent drop-off. So that takes place at a couple of locations, one on Benton and then one on the east parking lot. Bus traffic is highlighted in yellow, and the orange dotted line are students walking to school. So you can see there's several conflicting points. Pedestrians crossing the bus area. In this location here, the connection between the two parking lots. The only access into the site right now is off of Benton. So what the district is proposing here is to add another entrance and exit to the site off of Tracy that would line up with Countryside. And the parent drop-off would take place solely on the north side of the building. They would no longer do the drop-off on Benton, be closer to the school, so no conflicting movements with the pedestrians coming into the site. And the buses and staff parking would be off of Tracy. So this would be a controlled, where the buses and cars couldn't access back and forth between those two parking lots. The additions to the school would be a brick in construction and match the existing school. All setbacks are met with the proposal on all sides. The number of parking stalls is also code compliant. In regard to landscaping, we did have some feedback in the Better Together notices about landscaping and screening of the parking lot. The district had submitted a landscape plan, but there were a couple of gaps, and those are the areas that are highlighted in red. So staff and the Planning Commission recommended additional plantings within those gap areas, providing some evergreen year-round landscaping. That would be a condition of any approval to add those plantings, subject to review and approval of the city forester. And the school district is agreeable to that condition. So the primary issue for consideration is the conditional use permit criteria met here. Staff and the Planning Commission believes that it is. There wouldn't be any adverse impacts on governmental facilities, utilities, would generate traffic within the capacity of the streets. And it is code compliant with the zoning ordinance, which in turn would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. As I mentioned, the traffic and circulation on the site would be vastly improved. There was a traffic study done in conjunction with the city and the school district that does conclude that there would not be any negative impacts to the roadways. Engineering staff has reviewed the left turn movements on that new intersection there on Tracy, the new access point, and we don't believe that there's any sightline issues. With the additional landscaping, that would also minimize impacts to the neighbors surrounding the property. So with that, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval of the request, but the request of the council tonight is to close the public hearing at noon on July 25th and continue action to August 3rd. One item that did come up at the Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission added a condition that the school district consider EV charging stations on the site. Since that time, the school district has evaluated that, and they've concluded that they would install the conduit for EV stations in 2023. So they're already thinking about that condition and are okay with putting that in. With that, I can stand for questions, and the school district is here for a presentation as well.
All right, good. Thank you, Director Teague. Questions for Director Teague? Member Pierce? No questions. No questions? Okay. Oh. Member Anderson?
Yeah, thank you. The construction period would be when?
I believe it would be next summer.
Next summer?
Yes.
Okay, that's thank you.
Sorry, this fall.
Oh, okay. Does that interfere with academics or bus drop-offs?
We can ask them to respond to that as part of their presentation.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Do we know, well, I guess we can get this from the applicant too. I was just thinking about the expansion of surface parking on both the north lot and I'll call it the east lot. Do we know how much additional square footage is being added in terms of asphalt in each location?
Yeah, that they may be able to answer that as well.
Okay.
A lot of green space on this site, but it certainly is an expansion of impervious surface.
Was there any discussion at the Planning Commission level about further berming on, let's say, on Benton, where Benton changes into Stewart, to insulate some of those homes a little bit more effectively from the lights?
We didn't talk about that. It was more centered around that filling in the landscaping.
Okay. Just running with the buses now having a new route of. Did they come in from the south off the new curb cut on Countryside?
Correct.
And then they'd head their lights would face north. Okay, let me think about that. We can talk to the applicant about that as well. Any other questions for Director Teague? Did that prompt anything else? All right, let's hear from the school district. I don't know if Maria Kennedy from Wold Architects is going to make a presentation or somebody else is. And then we'll open it up for public testimony. Good evening.
That's okay, we can share. That works too. Good evening, I'm Maria Kennedy from Wold Architects, and I'd say we are just really here to answer questions. We don't have any additional presentation material this evening, but can certainly address those questions you have, and Eric would like to introduce himself.
I'm Eric Hamilton, Director of Buildings and Grounds for Edina Public Schools, and thanks for having us, and again, we'll answer any questions that you have. We don't have a formal presentation for you tonight.
All right, let me go to Member Anderson first.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering about the construction start, and I kind of heard an echo in the back about starting as early as this fall. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the construction schedule begins in fall of 2023 with the excavation for the building additions. I'm sorry, 2022, correct. It starts this fall, and is planned to run to complete by December of 2023. However, the portion that would affect the parking area would be done during the summer because obviously there's an operational school building that needs to be maintained during the school time. So there's some phasing within the project to make sure that it maintains school function.
Okay. I've dropped off over there a lot, and it always seems like it gets pretty wild in there in the mornings especially. And that's what prompts the question of what kind of interruption might there be to those drop-offs, student activities, that kind of thing, and what are your plans for that?
Yeah, it won't impact, it won't have a direct impact to the busing or parent drop-off. We're going to, for better phrase, attack the building from the south side. And so we'll be looking to get footings in and working from that south side. The impact to the school will be the upper playground. We're going to close that side of the building just to make it safer for everybody. And there's a playground on the lower level that they'll have access to. So we'll be routing parents the same route they have before, routing kids and teachers for during school activities out the other end of the building. So we'll have a complete separation from students and staff during the school year. The majority of the work, the heavy stuff, the parking lots, those kind of things are going to happen in the summer.
I see. Good. Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Pierce, Member Staunton, any questions at this point in time? Okay, thank you. Let's go back to that. I've got the site plan up now with the new proposed plan, the new curb cut on Countryside. The buses come in and they kind of head down the east side of that parking lot and then swing around so they can drop the kids close to the school door. As I recall, there's some topography there that probably acts as a barrier for lights that would be pointing to the northeast.
Right.
Or straight
If you
north.
come into our property from the north and you turn in,
Yeah.
you actually come down into our property. So then coming in from the proposed direction, which will be heading a little bit north, like you said, there is a rise there that'll catch the majority of that light, for sure.
Okay. And then how about if you go further east where you got the visitor parking, or further west, I mean, if you go to the visitor parking and you're going to probably have more parents dropping off kids now up at the north end of the school, what kind of thought have you given to the idea of berming or a combination of berming and landscaping there to provide a little insulation for those neighbors along Benton?
Yeah, there is, again, there's a grade difference at that point. There's a berm right between our property and Stewart. We'll be filling in that berm, that little section that's open right now.
Oh, all right.
So I think as far as
see that.
Lights on houses, I don't know that we're going to be impacting it any different than we are currently.
Okay.
And I'd say the additional landscaping also provides, fills in those gaps.
And it will be, there'll be conifers, not deciduous, sounds like.
The details of that are being worked on. I know it's going to be reviewed by
we're going to work with the city forester.
And the city forester, that's the word.
Okay.
But-
All right. Those are all the questions I had. Is there anything either of you wanted to add in terms of being the applicant, things you wanted us to consider or folks in the community to consider?
Just know that we did listen to the city or the planning commission. In fact, we took it a step farther than what they recommended. We're actually doing projects right now, and the projects that we have open, we put conduit into those sites. So at a future point, when we kind of get to that decision-making process, we've already got conduit to the locations that we determined for electric charging stations. So we took their recommendation to heart.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. All right, stand by. We're going to go to public testimony now. We'll see if anybody is here that wants to testify, and then we'll go online. So, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify regarding this matter? Okay, I'm not hearing anything or seeing anybody coming forward. Do we have anybody online, Director Benarott?
I do have someone on the line, but not in the queue to speak. As a reminder, if you'd like to speak, you need to press *1 on your telephone keypad. That will get you in the queue to speak. Otherwise, because there's a slight delay in the broadcast, I would recommend we wait a minute or so before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:52. So I will come back with you at 7:53 or when I have someone in the queue, whichever's first.
All right, very good, thank you.
I think it's safe to move forward with your agenda at this point.
All right, thank you, Director Benarott. Council members, is there a motion to close the public hearing in this matter at noon on July 25th, 2022, and continue the action on this matter involving Countryside Elementary School to the August 3rd, 2022 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Member Pierce, second by Member Staunton. To the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, we've got that matter taken care of, and we'll revisit that on August 3rd. The next matter, also involving the school district, is a project, proposed project over at Concord Elementary School. Director Teague, you have this matter as well.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is the exact same request, conditional use permit, but a much less detailed project. So what the proposal here is to build a classroom addition to Concord, very small in size, and there's no changes to the site plan itself. The existing parking lots, all of that stays the same. So the building addition, again, very small in size and would match the existing school, and there's no changes to the site plan. All setbacks are met with the addition. Number of parking stalls exceeds code, so there's plenty of parking. Same issue is the conditional use permit criteria met. Again, both staff and the Planning Commission believe that it is very minimal impacts here. So with that, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval, and we would recommend tonight that you close the public hearing at noon on July 25th and continue action to the August 3rd City Council meeting.
All right, very
with
good.
that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Teague from the council? All right, hearing nothing, Director Teague, let's bring Ms. Kennedy or the folks from the school district back up, see if there's anything they want to share with us before we open it up for public testimony.
Hi again. I think we just add that this is an addition that is being done for special education and then flexibility for the district to be able to have a classroom to flex into. So if there's any questions about the why or other parts of the project, we can certainly answer that as well.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Wold? All right. We have nothing. All right. You can go ahead and sit down and stand by.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing matter. I'm going to open it up for public testimony. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify regarding this matter? All right. Is there anyone online that wishes to testify regarding this matter?
No, sir, I still don't have anyone. I would recommend we wait 1 minute before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:56. I'll come back to you at 7:57 or when I have a caller, whichever's first.
All right. Thank you.
I still don't have anyone, so I think you can move on.
Thank you. With regard to proposed resolution 2022-62, which would involve the potential issuance of a conditional use permit for Concord Elementary School, is there a motion to close the public hearing at noon on July 25th, 2022, and continue the matter to the August 3rd, 2022 City Council meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Member Anderson moves, Member Pierce seconds the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, that completes the public hearing portion of the agenda this evening. We're now going to move on to the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda, and the first matter there is Resolution 2022-63, which accepts donations on behalf of the City of Edina. We need to handle that by supermajority if we're going to accept a gift to the city. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-63, accepting a donation on behalf of the City of Edina from one of our residents?
So moved.
Second.
Member Pierce moves the adoption of Resolution 2022-63. Member Staunton seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And this resolution involves a single donor to the Park and Rec Department, Elliot Nickel, a very generous $700 donation for trees at Browndale Mill Pond. And thank you, Mr. Nickel. Appreciate that, and his name will be posted up on the city website. Next matter is Resolution 2022-65, which, if approved by the council, would approve the proposed local sales tax questions and authorizing the election thereon during the 2022 general election. And our city manager, Scott Neal, has this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Resolution 2022-65 is a resolution that lays out the ballot language and the rationale for the ballot language in a resolution format for the City Council to consider and adopt. If you do adopt this resolution, this will be passed on to Hennepin County, and this language will be included on our ballot for the general election in 2022. Early voting starts in September of 23. We have an August 26th, I believe, clerk, yes? August 26th deadline to adopt this language. We recommend that the council move forward with this language and this resolution this evening. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes, thank you, Manager Neal. Are there any questions for Manager Neal with regard to this proposed language in Resolution 2022-65, which deals with the local sales tax questions that we've been talking about for many months now, and would authorize the election thereon in the 2022 general election? Questions by anybody? Okay. All right, very good. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-65, which would approve the proposed local sales tax questions for voting by our residents and authorizing the election thereon during the 2022 general election?
So moved. Second.
Member Anderson moves, Member Pierce seconds. The motion is stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we are on to one of the issues du jour around our state, which is the passage of a piece of legislation at the state legislature that's led to some issues around local control and local enforcement, and our staff has really been working hard on this. And I think, of course, our one of our legislators locally, Heather Edelson, was the chair of one of the subcommittees that worked on this, and she's been working very, very hard on it. It all kind of stemmed from some confusing language, I think, in the 2018 Farm Bill that they wanted to try to clean up to provide for the clear legality of THC in some products, but there was no kind of regulatory mechanism, as I understand it, included in the state legislation that was passed. And so here we are with local control issues to talk about, and I know that our missing colleague Carolyn Jackson had some strong thoughts on this, and others may as well. And so I thought we should talk about it, but I'm going to turn it over to Manager Neal right now to talk about what he's been working on from a staff level and also with our city attorney. Manager Neal.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have been, as you noted, from a staff perspective, working on this issue since it really first came to our attention on July 1st, so not too long ago. I think what we are proposing to you tonight is the adoption of a moratorium on the sale, testing, manufacturing, distribution of THC products, THC-infused products in the city. And this is an ordinance, and we're proposing first reading of this ordinance this evening. This ordinance provides a 12-month time period for us to study the issue and to create, if the council so wishes, a regulatory structure in which to regulate the sale and use of these products within our city. I think ultimately we are going to do that. I think the state is ultimately going to enable us to do that. I think we are good at that. We currently use a regulatory structure for tobacco control that I think would work pretty well, actually, very effectively for this same kind of, for these kinds of materials. We have forms, we have fees, we have protocol for how we do background checks and compliance checks and so forth. So we have penalties, we prescribe sales environments, all of which would be included in the regulation of these products as well. We do not have that ready for you tonight. If we had a moratorium such as the one being proposed, we'd have some time to develop that and discuss that with the council and make sure we're on firm ground for going in that direction. So that is our recommendation for this evening, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions, folks? Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That sounds very prudent, pragmatic approach. The only question that I have is, are you prepared to today be able to speak to what some of our sister cities, I said that wrong, what approaches they might be taking?
I think so.
I think we could.
Yeah, the mayor and I were on a call this morning with a number of our peer cities, so we can report some of that information. Some are still thinking about it, but some have gone forward with adoption of the moratorium language.
So, some are thinking, I think Bloomington in particular, and I'm suspecting that Minnetonka as well, thinking about putting some regulation in place and not do a moratorium, because that their concern was that, well, no, the state legislature has said that THC is a legal product, and now you're putting a moratorium on the sale of a legal product. And so maybe we're better off framing something up that works, and as Major Neal said, in looking at our tobacco ordinance, it looks like we could modify that relatively quickly to deal with it if we chose to go that route. And on the call too today, frankly, the issue of whether we could actually do a moratorium was raised by a couple of cities, because, and Member Staunton may have some real good insight on this, that a couple of lawyers raised the issue of whether or not you could have a moratorium on licensing as opposed to a licensing issue as opposed to a land use issue under the statute, the way it reads. So we don't have anybody in the community that we are aware of that sells THC.
We don't have any vape shops or tobacco shops either.
But there may be somebody that wants to come and set up shop and sell a legal product. So after listening to everybody's opinions that were pretty wide-ranging from these cities, it struck me that if we did do the moratorium, we should get to the ordinance as fast as we could, because we are dealing with a product that's been determined to be legal by the legislature. So I don't know, our city attorney, Mr. Kendall, any thoughts on? You probably, in all the cities you represent, there's different points of view too. I think up in Plymouth, the mayor there said his position, at least as one of 7, was going to be, he's not going to do anything that inhibits people that are in the business of selling this product legally to be unable to sell it. And so it depends on your factual circumstances in your particular community, I think. So, and I think Mr. Kendall's firm represents Plymouth as well as Edina.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, yeah, that's correct. We do represent Plymouth. Cities are doing a variety of different things. Some cities are doing nothing and just letting the state statute stand as it is. Some cities are doing a regulatory structure that kind of helps to enforce the state statute. And some cities are doing a moratorium. And the thinking among most of the city attorney community is that cities have that option to do the moratorium. So I think all three of those options are on the table for you.
Member Staunton.
Yeah, I'll just chime in terms of, I'll defer to Mr. Kendall on the authority to do this, and I think, there's some nuance that only city attorneys can love about the moratorium versus license and all the rest of that. I'm confident we're on solid ground on that, but I just wanted to recognize Representative Edelson for wading into this, because what had happened was there were places around the state where this product was being sold at 50 milligrams, 75 milligrams, 100 milligrams, and people were getting sick or ended up in emergency rooms because they didn't know what they were doing, and so I think she deserves credit for wading into what has obviously turned out to be quite a thorny issue, but she took on the public health piece of this, and I think eventually the state is going to get around to helping regulate this as well, and so I'm fine with us going through a pause where we figure out what to do, especially given that we're not aware of any sales, manufacturing, or distribution in the city now. So we're not dislocating any businesses that may be already underway. And I think we'll learn from what other cities are doing, and I think this is going to, the world's changing on this front, and other states are wading into this, and I think we're going to get there as well. And so we want to make sure and protect people who shouldn't be, minors and other young people who shouldn't be wading into this. And so I think this is a reasonable step to take to try to measure twice and cut once. But I do want to recognize our state representative, Heather Edelson, who took on a tough issue that might have been easier to let alone, but I think we were going to have to do something on this, and she's kind of raised an important issue that all kinds of cities are going to have to deal with, and I think the state will come back around and give us some more shape to this in the next year as well. So that's my thoughts on it.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with my colleagues in that we're on very safe ground, and it seems to be the most prudent course at this time. We can, as the picture becomes clearer and we have more time to dedicate, then we can consider how we might regulate it in our community. But I think we're on the right path. Thank you.
I just want to reinforce what Councilmember Staunton has said about our representative, Heather Edelson, who tried to make the world a safer place in terms of the sale of this product, because it was the Farm Bill and at the federal level that created this uncertainty as to what could be sold, hemp-related products. There were vape shops, hemp shops, tobacco shops, gas stations selling products with no limit on the potency of THC. And to Member Staunton's point, this bill that came out of our state legislature that she helped foster through the process did a great deal in terms of progress, in terms of safety, and then particularly with respect to limits on potency. So I think there are some really good things that came out of it. And now she's busy meeting with people and explaining things, and she's doing she did a wonderful job on our call this morning with all those cities, handled herself beautifully, and represented us well as a city, and represented our state well too, I thought, in the work that she did. So I thought this morning that the moratorium was probably the way to go, and then the conversation ensued, and I got to listening to what other people were talking about in other communities, and the fact that this was a legal product. But if our city attorney is telling us that we can have a moratorium, and I think our goal with moratoriums has always been to have them in place as short a period of time as possible if we do them. We've had conversations about them over the years, and we've been generally reluctant to impose moratoriums, especially with regard to land use. So I'd be comfortable with adopting a moratorium and thinking that we could come back as early as August 3rd with some proposed form of ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, members of council, we would endeavor to create a short-term moratorium, even though we're declaring it for 12 months. You can kill the moratorium anytime you want, whenever you feel comfortable by doing it. But we think we can put together the structure, the regulatory structure. It won't take long to do that.
Okay, good. And I want to make sure that we give Councilmember Jackson a chance to weigh in on it too, because she had some strong thoughts about it. So it'll be important to get her view of it as well. So is there a motion to approve ordinance 2022-06, which would impose on an interim basis a prohibition on the sale, testing, manufacturing, and distribution of THC products in the city of Edina, and this would be granting it on a first reading basis?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Member Staunton and second by Member Pierce to adopt ordinance 2022-06 on a first reading basis in the form stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance number 2022-06 on a first reading basis, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, and then the last matter in this portion of the agenda is a matter that we had in public hearing when we had our last meeting, and now it's resolution 2022-55, which is the potential issuance of a conditional use permit and a variance for Interlochen Country Club for a project that they aspire to do over there. And Emily Boddicker, our assistant city planner, has this matter. Ms. Boddicker, welcome.
Thank you.
Your Honor, can we pause for just a second, because we need to handle the Interlochen recusal issue?
Oh.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself as I'm a member at Interlochen.
All right, very good. Thank you.
And, Your Honor, it leaves you with 3 votes left. So these are, and I think we just conferred that it's the majority of the 3 would be sufficient to pass this item tonight.
Okay, very good. All right, Ms. Boddicker, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, council is asked to take action on a conditional use permit and a building height variance at Interlochen Country Club at 6200 Interlochen Boulevard. The proposed facilities include a 15,000 square foot lodge with food service, a 17,000 square foot fitness center, 5 outdoor tennis courts, 2 indoor tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts, and 3 platform tennis courts. A conditional use permit is required for the new structures that are proposed. The covered tennis courts require a structure height variance from 20 feet, which is allowed for accessory buildings, and they're requesting a building height of 39 feet. The boundaries of the country club are not changing with the proposed project. All the work is done within today's boundaries. The City Council held a public hearing on June 21st. The public comment period on Better Together was closed on July 11th. Comments received were included in your packet tonight. A number of those comments received were on hours of operation and screening. The hours of operation included in the conditions in Resolution 2022-55 are the club's current hours of operation. The City Council can add additional conditions or change the hours of operation to address concerns if needed. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the request on June 15th. The Planning Commission recommended approval of the conditional use permit and the building height variance, which passed on a 6-1 vote. Tonight, staff's recommendation is to approve Resolution 2022-55 based on the findings and conditions listed in the resolution. And with that, I can answer any questions, and Joel Livingood, the CEO and General Manager of Interlochen, is also here tonight.
Member Sutton.
So on the hours, especially for the outdoor activities, how do those compare to our park hours?
Our parks close at 10 p.m.
Okay.
Is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, basically, I'm trying to figure out if we're aligning these hours with what our parks, so that if a similarly situated single-family resident was near a park where this activity was going on, how long would they have to expect it to go on in the evening? And it sounds like we're aligning those hours.
Yes, and those are the hours that the club is currently operating at today as well.
All right, thank you.
Member Anderson, do you have anything at this point in time? Any questions for-
Only this. I went over and toured the proposed area, looked at the layout, and it looked to be in order. I think that they've done what they can to be certain to create as little impact as possible in the immediate neighborhood, and so I was frankly impressed with their planning.
All right, thank you. Ms. Boddicker, when we had the public hearing in this matter, you made a presentation on behalf of staff that you thought the conditional use permit criteria had been met. That opinion hasn't changed, I take it?
That opinion has not changed.
That you do
please.
continue to believe that the CUP criteria have been met, and you stand in favor as a staff of the issuance of the ordinance?
Correct.
I'm just looking at the setback table too, and it looks like north lot line, city standard is 95 feet, they're at 96 feet, 50 feet for the courts, and they're at 50 feet, south lot line 50 feet, and they're roughly 400 to 600 feet there.
Correct.
West line 50 feet, and they're at 207 feet, east lot line 50 feet, and they're at 1,000 plus feet. So is that all accurate?
Yep, that's all accurate. I will also note that today, the existing tennis courts don't comply with that 50-foot setback, and so when they are reconstructed, they will meet the 50-foot setback.
Okay, good. Yeah, I see the tennis structure, the city standard is 20 feet, and they're going to be at 39 feet. And then the only issue we got, really, everything else is in compliance, is that variance for the height of the building. And if I remember right, we talked about the height allowed for single-family homes in the neighborhood was 37 feet, or?
A single-family house on a wider lot would be allowed to be constructed up to 40 feet.
40 feet, and this was 37?
39.
39, okay. All right. Okay, that's that's all the questions I had. With regard to the, and we've had the matter open for further input. With regard to Resolution 2022-55, is there a motion to approve the conditional use permit and variance for Interlochen Country Club, 6200 Interlochen Boulevard, to do the improvement works they wanted to do?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and second to adopt Resolution 2022-55, which would approve the conditional use permit and variance request for Interlochen Country Club at 6200 Interlochen Boulevard. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right. Thanks, Ms. Boddicker. And then we have one other matter in this portion of the agenda, and then not much after that, and that is a sketch plan for lifetime living on the Southdale property site. Mr. Livingood, thank you for being here to answer questions potentially.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, as the applicants are walking in, I'll just quickly tee this one up. The proposal, as mentioned, is for a sketch plan this evening. It's for a 300-unit, 32-story apartment building. This request, should a formal application be made, requires a site plan review, a building height variance. Within this zoning district, 12 stories is the maximum height required. They also need a building setback variance to adjacent R1 properties. We have a unique ordinance in Edina that requires any building that's taller than 9 stories needs a setback 6 times the height of the building. So a 2,400-foot setback is required to any R1 property. The Cornelia neighborhood, some of those closest homes are about 2,100 feet, and single-family homes in Richfield are just under 900 feet. Also, a parking stall variance would be needed. There will be, as part of a formal application, a traffic study accompanied with a parking study that would take a look at the Southdale site as a whole. And believe it or not, Southdale is short parked, so there's a variance that's required for that. And a conditional use permit is required for the residential use on the property. So the uses that are contemplated here are allowed just through a conditional use permit. Christine Picard of ESG is here this evening along with Eric Padgett from Lifetime, and they will present the details of the project.
Thank you, Director Teague. And Mr. Padgett and Ms. Picard, welcome.
Honorable Mayor, council members, thanks for having us here tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to share our plans and let it be known too that there's partners of ours that may not be in presence today here, but are also online, and there might be some additional consultants that come. Really, what we're talking about tonight is our continued success at Southdale. So we want to first thank you for, in 2019, we transformed a dead JCPenney box into a brand new Lifetime athletic resort, Lifetime work, and Lifetime sport. And that was really our first phase of redefining the north part of Southdale Mall. It's been highly successful for us, and we think it's also been a great community asset for the residents of Edina. But we're not done yet. We've been working with staff, and we've partnered with Simon, the owner of Southdale Mall, to continue our transformation to complete our visions of live, work, play, and stay healthy village right here in Edina, with a collective goal of delivering an iconic and premier health and wellness destination. So we're here tonight. It's really the first step of the process. This is our sketch plan submittal. So what we want to do tonight is really share our initial plans, get your feedback, much like we did with the Planning Commission last week, and then how do we partner with you to make this a great redevelopment opportunity, something that we can all be proud of. We're not here asking for any approvals tonight. We're just really here to get your feedback. As you all know, redevelopment's not easy. It takes a lot of puzzle pieces to put it together. There's a lot of stakeholders involved to deliver an iconic project. There's owners, there's staff, there's residents, there's guide plans, there's county, there's agencies, there's building codes, market forces, and then us as investors in continuing this transformation. I think we all can agree, though, redeveloping an underutilized parking lot at Southdale Mall into a healthy village, replacing that dead parking is really a great idea. So let's talk about how we got there. So I'm first going to define what lifetime living is. So lifetime living is a for-lease apartment home designed in a health-forward way. So we're creating an environment that is designed to support our residents and members in every way, including all the way through our concierge level of service. No stone is unturned. It's a natural extension of Lifetime and our athletics resort and Lifetime work, as all of our residents are members at Lifetime. So they become members of our Lifetime athletic resort, and that's included in their rent. And our goal is really so that they can become an active part in our healthy way of life community. Connections. Connections is really important for us to deliver that healthy village. We're utilizing our first-class amenities in the athletic resort and Lifetime work, but it goes beyond just those building assets. It's really about creating a community and connecting the community with the larger community, as mental and social well-being are as important to our well-being as our physical fitness. And to create that community, it goes beyond that four walls of our building. It's about creating active spaces, walkability, connecting with nature, connecting with first-class assets here in Edina, and removing the barriers that can complicate our daily lives, like traffic. And it's all really, the end goal is to give us time back to focus on our health. And finally, we want to create a home that feels like a resort. From high quality fit and finish of the homes to the littlest details to promote healthy cooking, rest and recovery, all those assets that go into that healthy way of life. So Lifetime has opened a couple of these healthy villages. We have a healthy village that we opened in Miami last year with raving success. We also have a new healthy village in River North, Chicago. It's the 5th tallest building in Chicago. There's over 800 residents. We have a full-size amenity club and Lifetime work. We'd love to take you there to share it with you. We also have projects in Las Vegas. We open a Lifetime Living project in Las Vegas in about 4 weeks, and we're getting unprecedented demand. We've got other projects similar in nature to this in Boston and suburban New York City, and a couple other ones on the way. The cool thing about that is Edina is a top priority for us. This is our home. This is where we grew up, and we're really excited about this opportunity for Lifetime. So let's get into the project. So when we started the ideation and vision for this project, again, there was a lot of stakeholders involved. But when we started to site the building to the mall property, we focused on the goals of the Southdale Design Guidelines: promote connectivity, pedestrian connections, create public realm, utilize the grid network as visioned, improve traffic circulation, and all the components that set us up for success as an iconic project, while also balancing the needs of the existing and future relationships of the tenants of the mall and the physical plant of Southdale, which currently holds over 1.3 million square feet of retail. So when we continue to ideate and vision on this continued transformation of Southdale Mall, there are many critical elements that went into our initial designs and what we think is important for making the project successful. One of our collective goals was first focused on transportation and pedestrian connections and circulation around the site. I know it's been a long city goal to eliminate some of the confusion with the ring road around Southdale Mall. Sometimes it's one way, sometimes it's two way, and how do we create that more navigable environment? And this was a high priority in our initial designs. As you can see on the screen today, in front of you, we have in the yellow highlight eliminated a lot of that confusion. So it turned a lot of the one-way circulation into two-way roads, really on the probably 180 degrees of the north half of the mall. Second, we focused on creating the desired grid network that was outlined in the Southdale Design Guidelines. We understand that goal was a guiding principle here, and we've prioritized this in our design. We're not perfectly meeting the 200-foot by 200-foot grid, but we've introduced a grid network similar to envisioned on the site, and a prioritization of street and pedestrian type ways to the whole northern gateway of the mall. We've done really our best shot for our first initial touch, given the existing needs of the tenants in Southdale and physical plant of the mall. So introducing that grid network, and this was kind of envisioned in the design guidelines, it caused impacts to the configuration of the transit center, the existing transit center. So by introducing that grid network, it didn't allow them to have the right operations, the right amount of parking ride spaces, and et cetera, in that existing location. But as we dug in further, we realized it was really a great opportunity for Metro Transit. So with their planning on the E-line and the BRT terminus, they needed more physical space. And so working with them, and we will continue to work with them, we've identified a site on the northern half of the mall which includes additional parking and ride spaces, about 25 additional spaces. It allows for the queuing that they want, for bus staging. It includes all the connections to the mall, and also just gives them a brand new facility. So they have not approved this plan yet, but they have seen it and they've given us feedback. But the initial response, especially with the new EBR or the E-line, they were very positive about the impacts or the opportunity to create this new transit center. Thirdly, a high priority for our team was to create the public realm and green space for the community. I can say I'm really proud of where we're heading with our proposed plan. We're creating a spectacular pocket park and over 1.5 acres of new green space to Southdale Mall. It's important for us and Simon that we heard from the Planning Commission, it's important that we activate and program that pocket park. You know, our initial thoughts was to activate it with a dog park, flexible lawn space, have events and activities like I mentioned yoga, like an outdoor yoga facility that we can activate. But we're still open. We're still in that early stages of planning and programming that park. We'd love your input on that. But the key thing to note is that this is a privately funded, privately built, publicly accepted, or publicly accessible for all the members of Edina, and it will be privately maintained. In addition, it was really a project goal for us to create a new gateway into Southdale Mall. And we wanted to create that gateway to make it feel welcome for all the community members in Edina. And again, all accessible to everyone in the community. So the results in all these goals really created an unparalleled opportunity of building a really attractive project and to provide a sense of place that is impossible or nearly impossible to replicate anywhere in Edina today. So some of the metrics I'll talk about, and Director Teague mentioned some of them. We are planning, and Christine Picard from ESG will share deeper into our building design plans and how we got to the design that we're sharing with you today. But we're planning 300 units of apartments in a 32-story tower. It also includes parking for all the residential units, about 450 spaces. We've also included in our parking 85 publicly accessible parking spaces. Those will be for the mall use. 65 of those spaces are actually internal to the parking podium. In addition, we've made a significant investment in improving pedestrian connectivity around our site. And it's really not just around our site, it's in, around, and through our site. And finally, we really wanted to create that iconic health and wellness destination, which is a goal in the Southdale Design Guidelines. I'll turn it over now to Christine to talk about our building design and how we got to where we are today. But I look forward to your questions, and really, again, we're here tonight to get your feedback.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Paget.
Is this on? Oh, perfect. Good evening. I'm Christine Picard. I am an architect and a partner with ESG, and I'm excited to be sharing some of the design concepts with you today. So as Eric mentioned, we're kind of looking at the site plan. This is the overall of everything that's happening across the Southdale district with the improvements of this project. But taking a quick look at the existing site conditions, just for comparative purposes, you can see it is a vastly hardscaped and underutilized parking lot with the transit station. You can kind of see some keynotes. The site itself is depressed down towards the mall. There's a mall entry right here, and we're proposing the building be adjacent to the Lifetime building that exists today. So taking a look at what this looks like as we propose our project. This is a site plan. This is kind of looking, again, more at the zoomed in area. I know the design guidelines talk a lot about master planning for the overall Southdale district, but there's limitations on what we can do with one single private development. So we're really hyper-focused on what this triangle site looks like. Some of the constraints that we're dealing with, again, the grade change on the backside of the site, and wanting to connect to the existing York Avenue entrance, which is the primary entrance into the east side of Southdale. So that's a little bit of a driver to the larger than 200 by 200 grid pattern that the Southdale guidelines talk about. We're kind of a little bit landlocked into trying to align with the Lifetime Club, trying to sandwich the building into kind of nesting it into the existing conditions, dealing with the grade change, and then looking at that York Avenue entrance. As you can see, the building is a canted shape. It's not the most efficient shape for the sake of the development, but we felt it was essential to try to respond to the existing conditions that are there today. We looked at a number of different configurations. Could this building be a simpler form and be more efficient and less expensive by right? And it was really starting to encroach on the site area and take up kind of more of the land area, and it was encroaching on kind of that York Avenue entrance. So we looked at ways of kind of pulling it back, nesting it back into the existing conditions so that you could have more green space and public area in front of the building. Just a couple thoughts there. And then the building is fully lined. It's not shown here, but it's fully lined with active dwelling units, walk-up dwelling units, and an active lobby space on all the outward-facing facades. So we'll get into this a little bit more. This is an example of how we've attempted to create the grid system. Again, albeit not that perfect 200 by 200, it is looking to try to create paths of connection in multiple various types. Maintaining existing streets, improvements to some of the existing streets that wrap the mall right now on the south side of the site, pedestrian connections that are heavily focused on allowing people to traverse the site despite it being open green space, and then maintaining and improving the existing pedestrian sidewalk connection. So looking at that a little bit in 3D, here you can see all of the network connections where we're looking at the vehicular infrastructure in and around the site. And then our next slide is looking at all of those pedestrian connections. Maintaining connections, again, while this is a very localized portion of the Southdale district, it was in the forefronts of our minds that it needed to connect to One Southdale, it needed to connect down to the promenade, it needed to invite neighbors from the east side of the city into the site and allow them mall access. So again, all that connectivity was kind of forefront of how you circulate across the site. Looking at the building design, you can kind of see the tower is set back. It's based on a podium that creates that continuum of what's there. So the podium isn't attempting to nest itself nicely into the existing fabric of the area and the buildings that were just built by Lifetime as part of phase 1 of this horizontal mixed-use development, and then the tower adjacent to that. Closer look, mirroring the scale of our podium to the scale of the buildings that are there. The built form guidelines in the Southdale guidelines talk about stepping buildings back and addressing things once the building gets above 60 feet. Our podium is just under that at the highest point. Some of them are as low as 35-40 feet. So the podium is proportionally designed in scale to the built form guidelines with step backs and means of massing it so that it fits into the context and prioritizes pedestrians. Looking at kind of some of the finishes, you can see that the base of the building is going to be high quality materials: stone, brick, masonry, low maintenance materials, architectural precast panels with architectural detail, things that are going to withstand the test of time. And then the tower is glassy metal panels. This is straight out of the design guidelines for building design. You can see in this image where we're prioritizing that pedestrian street across the front of the building. We're trying to create a separation between what would be the front yard of the building, what would be kind of a public realm for traversing the site, and then what becomes a little bit more private as you get into the front porches of the walk-up liner dwelling units. A look at the front entrance. Some of the concepts that we've been talking about is allowing for there to be kind of a front door, an acknowledgement of where to go for drop-off, pickup, but also creating an UNERF condition or something that's extremely flexible in the front of the building so that it could be used for large gatherings, activities, anything that the community or Lifetime would want to do as far as events. So just kind of thinking about the flexibility and how that might be used in a number of different ways. And then this is a view of the York-facing walk-up units. And again, a secondary entrance on this side for residential access. A look at the building. And then to look at some close-ups of the building, you can kind of see it was important in the design intent for the tower to create some movement, both vertically and to create some moments of interest throughout the height of the tower. So you can see kind of these pocket areas where we're creating kind of a two-story penthouse space at an intermediate height in the building. We do this on the northeast corner, and then we also do it on the southwest. And to take kind of a close-up look at that, we're looking at making this a very transparent building, glassy. It's a legacy project. And then there's some architectural fins that we're studying. We're looking at the, creating kind of a ribbon of an expression with the accent metal panel that wraps up and around the building to create kind of moments of interest that break up kind of that glassy facade. And then a look at the top of the building, which would have a sky room and an outdoor terrace. A night rendering. And then just to address a couple of the things that we're asking for with this proposal, because we're asking for a height variance and because we're asking for a setback variance, I wanted to share with you a shadow study that we've done. So you can see summer solstice, there's very little, the shadowing does not even reach the residential communities to the east. Same with the equinox, it's still kind of harboring in that commercial area or that multifamily area along York. The moments in which it starts to get close to the residential is in the late winter months, which is, you can see from here, the residential communities are getting shadowed by adjacent buildings. Right now in the at like 3 p.m. in December, it's not even touching those residential communities that are within that setback requirement. So what you would be allowing with the acceptance of a variance. I think in the worst case condition later in January, it touches it just barely next to the corner of the residential homes in this corner. And then a closer look at kind of what the development is aiming to do. Eric kind of talked about the active green space, and I think we heard at Planning Commission that just a lot of open green space might not be enough. And I think Lifetime is thinking about how they want to program this, and I think this is where we could really use kind of some community input. This is proposing to add over 1.5 acres of open green space for the community. It is all completely open for the public to use. It would be accessible. There would be amenities to it, an off-leash dog park. We've talked about pickleball courts. We've talked about lawn space for Lifetime-hosted events like yoga. There's a number of different ways that this could be activated. As with any residential community, it is important that there be some type of programming to keep spaces active and alive. I think part of that needs to be achieved through design, and part of that needs to be achieved through management and the way that it's privately operated and maintained. That's not lost on Lifetime. I think this is an incredible asset to the city of Edina. When you look at the Southdale guidelines, it calls for a park. It calls for it a little bit further north, but, and we're re-justifying it. But what we're doing here is putting it right at the entry off of York. So, you're flanking that primary entrance into this development with copious amounts of green space. I think this is where I would make the argument that, Mixed Report talks a little bit about this being an inward development, and I struggle with that because I see it as phase 2 of a horizontal mixed-use development, for one. I see adding 300 units of density to this area as an extreme catalyst for what's going to happen next. I think it's going to be a domino that falls and allows Simon to redevelop a number of other parcels that are existing today that should be revitalized. I see it as encouraging development to the west and to the north of it, and then I clearly see this Pocket Park area as an asset for the entire community. So those are just a few things on the design. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, thanks, Ms. Picard. I'm sure there are some for either you or Mr. Padgett. So I'll turn to my colleagues. Mr. Anderson, you want to, Councilmember Anderson, you want to start? Lead us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some questions. Now, you didn't mention this tonight, Mr. Padgett, but you did to the Planning Commission. You discussed market support. You were pretty excited about that as you delivered those remarks. So I'm assuming you're discussing your area market study when you discuss market support?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of context of our success at some of our other lifetime living projects, some of the interesting feedback that we're getting is that the Lifetime brand brings in a whole new community member. So for instance, in our Coral Gables project, which is Miami, it's a 495 unit project. 30% of our renters there were Lifetime members in the Northeast, right? When I say the Northeast, I mean New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., and they didn't really desire to move to Miami until they found out Lifetime was opening up this healthy village. In addition, in our project in Las Vegas, we're attracting a customer that almost treats us as a second home. So I think about 20% of our renters that will move in about a month are actually from Los Angeles, Dallas, New York, and other markets, and they know that Lifetime will deliver what they want, right? So we're attracting that different demographic. In addition, our success at Lifetime here in Edina has been overwhelming. We have capacity issues oftentimes on our rooftop pool because it's so successful. Our members love us. Our NPS scores, which is our Net Promoter Scores, are off the charts. And so they come to us and say, if you build it, we will come, right? And so 300 units to us is about the right number to deliver that operational excellence that we like to do in the club.
Okay, so then just to come back quickly to the market study question. You've done one, you have one, and that which suggests to you that you're not going to be encountering vacancy rates or long-term vacancy rates. Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. And who did that study? Was it done locally?
It was done by Myers Research.
By Myers Research. Good, thank you.
Which is now Zonda.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Ms. Picard, not tonight, but earlier to the Planning Commission, you mentioned average unit size at about 1,300 feet.
Yep.
Accurate?
Yep.
Now, are you using, either one could answer, are you using about $300 a foot for construction cost?
That's about right.
Yeah, so are you then you're close to $400,000 per door, correct, in terms of construction?
Actually, a little bit higher than that, yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes, higher than that.
You think it'll be higher than that?
Yes.
But I'm using $300 a foot.
Yeah, it's probably closer to over $500,000.
Okay, so you're about $500 a foot or a door. All right, so then your rents, I took a look at rents in other markets that you're present in. What would you project those rents to be here?
You know, we're projecting those rents based on our market study today to be about $3.50 a foot.
All right, so I don't have my calculator. But so you're 4,500 roughly for your average unit, average 4,500.
That's about the same as the Bauer, I think.
The Bauer is close to that.
About 350, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly
And I think Nolan Mains, too.
And Nolan Mains, yes, thank you.
That's right.
Okay. And you mentioned also earlier this evening, though, that you are privately funded, and so you don't anticipate requesting any kind of public financial support, like a TIP district, anything like that?
No, that's our current strategy, correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Member Pierce, anything you want to visit with folks about?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a couple of general questions. One, you spoke about the target demographic, and then you listed the current facilities that you have today for this one, what would be the target demographic? I'm just assuming it's not the same as who's going to Miami.
Right. I do think that there's a place for everyone, and that's kind of our design effort in this project. We do expect that there will be some younger folks coming out of school, but I do think you're going to get a wide array. I do think that there is a demographic here in Edina and around the Twin Cities that would treat us as a second home. That would, move down south in the winter and then want still to be in Edina for their home. What percent of that is, I don't know, but I do think that there's a demographic there. But again, I think we're going to see a wide array of folks who want to live here, and it all comes back to that active lifestyle that we're promoting. You walk into our clubs today, you see families, you see the empty nesters, you see high school kids. High school kids obviously probably wouldn't be their renters, but as part of the family that would rent from us. So I do think that we'll see a wide array of demographics.
Okay, thank you. And then you talked about this being kind of a cornerstone in that area for what's next. So, when I ask you this question, I'm not thinking about what's next in the next 3 years. Right. What do you think is next? When you envision the tower, the way you describe it, what do you view as what's next in that space?
I really think this project will continue to be a catalyst for Southdale Mall and redevelopment opportunities. I think you're going to attract a higher-end grocer. I think you're going to attract different retail tenants that aren't serving there today. I think there's really an opportunity for Simon to take a hard look at how they reposition the mall. And they've done that in phases. It's not a scrape and start over situation, but you have to have that tip of the spear like Restoration Hardware has been, right? Mm-hmm. And so for Lifetime, this is the businesses that we own and operate today. But it's really about catalyst for redevelopment of Southdale Mall.
Okay. And then my last question, you talked a lot about the public realm. And when you view the renderings, that all sounds great. But how do you think that's going to work in practice for a private facility to have so much green space that we're going to say is public realm? How do we activate that to have the local community really feel invited or comfortable, if you will, to utilize those grounds that really surround a private facility?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of efforts that Lifetime puts into activating the community. So I think about the Turkey Trot used to be hosted at Southdale, which is the 5K on Thanksgiving Day. It's programs like those that will really activate and show the accessibility to the park and the green space. I talked a little bit about yoga. Christine mentioned pickleball. Pickleball is a really big business for Lifetime right now, and creating maybe that for a community here, which is honestly a little bit of marketing for Lifetime. We can have it at public pickleball courts, and then those folks are like, I really love the sport. I want to be a member of Lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so that activation, but again, everything that Lifetime wants to do is to promote the healthy way of life, right? So it's activating that space.
Okay, thank you.
Member Staunton? Yeah, nothing right now? No. Okay, good. Well, not good, it's just observation. Have you had any preliminary conversations of looking at the site plan with the proposed relocation of the bus transit station? Have you had any preliminary conversations with Metro Transit around that possibility?
Mayor, we have. We've had a couple of calls with them. They've also produced their, I'll call it design guidelines, what they need from a programming perspective, which includes bus queue lengths, the circulation, the amount of parking ride spaces that they want. We've told them that we were going through the sketch plan process, and then if we felt comfortable with the direction that we were heading, we would re-engage with them. So it seemed like there was initial support for it. And I think the way they think about it is as the E line comes through Fairview, this is a perfect access point right out of Fairview into the Southdale district. And so that's when we shared that initial kind of thought with them. And this was actually proposed by Simon. They were in agreement that it could be something that they could move forward with.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. I think it'll be an important part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
We got that set up several years ago in that northeast location, and getting Metro Transit comfortable with moving it would be critical, really, to making something work there. On the positive side, really feel good about the green space. You know, when years ago when we started looking at the aerials of that whole Southdale district from Crosstown to 494 and York to France, there wasn't much green space in there other than Centennial Lakes.
Right.
And we're slowly creating more and more green space, so that's a positive. I don't know how the shadowing, some people I've heard say that, well, it's going to be in the shadows all the time, but I think your shadow study shows otherwise, especially during the summer months and the fall and spring months when people want to be outside using pickleball courts or whatever it is, platform tennis, whatever you guys decide you're going to do there, the dog walking park. I like the idea that you got all the parking spaces hidden. I think that's important. There's some cachet in being up there with Las Vegas and Coral Gables and Chicago, I guess, a town our size. Not that that would influence us on our decision-making process, but I also like the concept from a basic standpoint, this whole, you called it, I think, lifetime resort, Mr. Paget, but that notion of lifetime work, lifetime fitness, or lifetime sport, now I heard you call it, and then lifetime living, that's an interesting idea that your organization came up with a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And when I first had conversations with your CEO a few years ago about the possibility of an apartment building there, I think Simon was always considered to be a potential partner. They own the land, and those initial conversations I had were always around, well, maybe we'll do 12 stories, maybe we'll do, we'll come in and ask about 18 stories, but now here you are asking for 32 stories and 300 units, and Simon owns the land, and while height and density have been issues in Edina, and density isn't an issue here because it's really not very dense, but it is tall. Mm-hmm. And so what are your thoughts on that? Why does it have to be so tall, or why didn't you like Mick Johnson's idea of three smaller buildings in the quadrant? And incidentally, I get the 200-foot problem that you faced, and I think you did a really clever work to try to work with what you had and try to get it aligned with the other buildings. Mm-hmm. But why don't you comment on that too?
Yeah, I think from a three-community or three-building perspective, as we look at it more and more, because we did go back and study it after some of the feedback from the AFO report and then also some of the Planning Commission members, again, we come back to really trying to create that community, right? And we don't want it to be like, oh, you're in building A, you're in building C. We really want to be that vertically integrated community. And from a height perspective, to deliver, the project that we think is really, again, that health and wellness destination, that 300 units feels right. And again, that density here in this location didn't feel out of scale. We don't feel like it's impacting some of the single-family residential, but really, again, trying to create that iconic destination here in Edina.
We've got that setback ordinance issue that we have to think about. Mm-hmm. But I was appreciative of the fact that despite the height, you're, 1,000 feet from houses in Richfield, roughly, and you're 2,500 feet from single-family dwellings on the west side?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of space between this building and the residential communities, both Richfield and Edina. And the way that the sun angles are working, that shadowing is happening to miss it. It's going northeast, so it's missing kind of that development despite it being directly to the east, so that's working for us. You know, to kind of comment on the height, I think it's always a balancing act of how to get the massing, to get the footprint, you know, kind of smaller so that there isn't a larger footprint that's then shadowing even more. You know, at the height that we're at right now, that's the balancing act, trying to densify. But in looking at the way that it gets broken up into multiple parcels, if you were to do smaller buildings, you're talking about an expense of 3 separate buildings that goes then into the infrastructure of 3 separate buildings, instead of, you know, to Councilmember Anderson's question, the value of the substantial amount of dollars that are being put into this development, really kind of creating that singular cohesive community. I think too, the amount of green space that we're proposing would simply not be possible if we had 4 parcels and multiple buildings
That was
here.
my next
I mean,
question.
it's as simple as that,
Yep.
right? So you, as you're thinking about how we're trying to densify this with a point tower, that's what it's buying you, is all that green space in front of the building, as opposed to all the roads that would be in a broken up kind of parcel.
And as long as I've been on this council with Member Staunton, we've always liked thin and tall, so you get green space around it, as opposed to wide and low. You know, at least that's my recollection. And you've accomplished that with a little over 1.5 acres plus of green space here. That it's a pretty important consideration too. I do continue to be, I won't use the word bothered, but just I need to think through the height thing. When I see it in your renderings, it's a beautiful building. When I look at it in scale with the Weston and the Bauer, it looks like it just dwarfs everything that's out there. And I'm the guy probably who's been the most comfortable with height. You know, I was in favor of height across France Avenue, and it never happened. But it's still it's something you have to kind of get familiar with and think through carefully. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just telling you that I need to think about it.
Yeah, that's valid. I think when I think about this project in the context of other projects, there are other taller buildings that are coming up that aren't existing today, right? The 70th and France project is 24 stories, and there's others. It's starting to set a precedent. Whether or not this fits into the context of that, that's a valid consideration. I think, you know, this is certainly a one-of-a-kind project. And we've heard several times over that if there's room for height in Edina, it's between France and York. So it feels like the location is right, but
Yeah,
fair comments.
That's a fair point too, that we've always talked about. If there's going to be height, it should be between France and York in the heart of that Southdale district. And there has been scattered height to that whole area for years, or even down on 494, you got a 20-story building right on 494, which most people would say, yeah, that's okay on 494, but you know, it's a little bit different when it moves further north into the Southdale neighborhood. So other than that, I mean, beautiful architectural work on your part, Ms. Paget, Ms. Picard, and Mr. Paget always does a great job presenting things. And I do think there is, you know, I understand that whole concept that you've tried to explain to us, that you're using other places and how it resonates with people in this day and age. So we got to think that through too. That's an important, you know, how this building works with the other buildings is an important consideration in creating that whole lifetime campus or lifetime resort, as you call it.
Right.
So,
Right.
Okay. Other questions from folks that prompt anything?
I
Pierce?
would, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you kind of hit where I was going in a couple of my questions, just kind of waiting to do comments here. The terms, the way you guys describe this, like you've used the word iconic, you've used the word precedent. And that's when I asked you, what do you see in the future? That's why I was asking those questions, just to kind of tease out how you're thinking about it. And I would have to say, I don't know that I would want this to be the iconic building for Edina. other words you use tower a lot. And it's a big building. It's a tall building. And I don't know how I feel about that yet. But when you think about this would be what I consider a smart city, as the closest to a smart city that would be near us.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about, there's one in Toronto, there's one in Seattle. This is kind of a self-contained, you've got smart technology in your building. There's a lot of density there. And so I do feel like, from a futuristic perspective, that would be the direction I would want to go. But I do think the height is going to be something that we'll have to get used to, or have to get comfortable with. And the other thing that I would add, I don't know that the height is necessarily just an issue with your design. I personally feel like if we do this, we are setting a precedent. But the precedent that part of the precedent that we're setting is it's okay to have that kind of variance in that space. It's okay for there to be a 32-story building, which I would think would lead us to the next building that is going to mirror that, or be close to that, or maybe a little higher, maybe a few stories shorter. And I look out 15 years from now, and I start to see a skyline there that I don't know, sitting here today, if I'm comfortable with that. And so how do I get comfortable with that? Two things. One, feedback from residents, asking them the same questions. How do you feel about what do you think from a futuristic standpoint? How do you see this fitting in? And two, I talk a lot about benefit to the community. And it's clear that you're striving to answer that second piece as well. But that's typically how I start to wrestle with that. But I've used your Lifetime Works building. No question that whatever you build would be top quality. It would be iconic in the space. But I have to get comfortable with that notion of the height. And then I think we ought to lean into, we've been kind of straddling that line with other developments in terms of the difference between the guideline and the variances. And I think we just have to really lean into, would this be okay? And what does that say about 10 years out for Edina? But I definitely, I think it's an awesome product. It looks great. But there are some things that I think we'd have to get comfortable with.
Member Staunton, starting to lean in.
So I think we've seen a lot of Mick Johnson memos over the years, and this one was pretty harsh. And so I'm concerned about that, because it says to me whether we have a mismatch between the design guidelines and what you're doing. So I'd be interested in more. I saw a little bit of the give and take in your response and his memo, but he went on for 10 pages. So that's going to be important to kind of think through that, because the design guidelines are doing that. And then I resonate with what Member Pierce was talking about in terms of thinking about what this makes possible around it. So to the south, in the Southdale design guidelines, we've kind of talked about this, figuring out a way to bring that promenade north through the Southdale super block and perhaps across West 66th eventually. How does this fit into that? If there is a park here, is that a park, or is that, and how do we make that a park? I don't know. For instance, I don't know if this would be a subdivision that would be park dedication or not, if this would be a dedicated park or how that would work. Some of that, if there was an extraordinary park that was part of this, that could really play a role in that whole big picture. So I think, it's a big swath and a big swing, and I'm not necessarily distressed by the height. I think, I do think whatever we go to, eventually people are going to be, that'll set the watermark. But I think as you go forward, you're going to want to really identify those design guidelines, because we spent a lot of time really trying to figure out what the future of this area is going to be like, and both for your particular property, but how it relates, what it's going to encourage around it is really going to be the critical piece for me.
Councilmember Anderson, any further add-on?
I do, yes, thank you very much. I'm going to offer you my insights just with complete candor, with your permission. That's what we're doing here tonight. Yeah. Okay, so first, you did a nice job with your design work, really nice. I think it's a big tip of the hat. You've done a lot of hard work. You're creating a look that relates to your business model, and I think that the live, work, play concept has great merit within your target market and in general. You understand, and it's kind of come out here and earlier, that when you bring forward a proposal of this magnitude, you effectively raise questions about the effect it might have on the mall property and the whole Southdale district, and you're hearing that over and over again. We don't have a master plan here. We don't employ farm-based design, but we do have the Southdale design guidelines. We've read all of us have read the Architectural Field Office commentary and ESG's response to it. So I'll come back to that in just a moment. At this time, you're seeking 3 variances, including parking, which we're going to discuss that at a later date, so we don't even know what variance you might ask for there. So I would share with you that I'm uncomfortable with setback variance relating to proximity to R1 property. The setback requirement is there to buffer to the degree possible the homeowners from development encroachment. And so for me anyway, that's tough territory. But we can talk about that too, because the height variance at 32 stories is, for me at least, too much. You heard Commissioner Smith, Olson, and Strauss mention height in various ways, but addressing the height level. You've heard a little bit of that here earlier this evening as well. Mick Johnson gave very little support to your proposal. He refers to it as a trophy building with little regard to street room typology or the 200 by 200 block guideline. And you've addressed that and responded to it. And I know that you are making a good faith effort to try to address that within your design. However, Commissioner Bennett made a point along the lines of recognizing your creativity and was actually quite positive about getting something started, getting a catalyst going in the area. And I tend to generally agree with that, although within the confines of the design guidelines and of course with respect to our zoning. So my specific thoughts are establish density with a lower profile. 2 buildings could probably accomplish that. McJohnson suggests 3, but I agree with you. I think 3 would, I don't know how you would do 3 there. Observe, please, the setback zoning requirements. The proximity to single-family homes in both Richfield and Edina, to me, is unacceptable. It's visual as well as falling within the zoning issues that we have. Ultimately, to me, the proposal points out the absence of master planning. Several commissioners mentioned that they're trying to figure out how the project fits into the bigger picture. A plan like that would be useful for you and other developers to see how anything fits in. On that note, the comments made about an inward-facing building are accurate, but to me at least, that's a reflection of the fact that the traffic loop keep Southdale isolated from the rest of the city street grid. You've encountered that as you do your planning. You're trying to introduce a grid into that, but because of that, the street room topography, the 200 by 200 block is elusive. That's a hard thing to nail down. But you have the opportunity to orient a new rectilinear grid there, or to the beginning of orienting a new rectilinear grid. Equity, affordability is absent. Accepting the per unit buy-in option will generate a big deposit in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's very accurate. But it won't build many affordable units, won't buy many affordable units, especially at our current pricing. But, as Buddha said, there's a way out. Mr. Padgett, your idea of finding a way to include affordable housing that comes with moving the transit facility, you mentioned that, and I think we need to talk about that, because that's a way to create affordability, to introduce equity into your project. So we can talk about that in the future. I know you're coming back. So thank you for your time. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
I didn't talk much about the architectural field office communication, but I appreciated your response and understood what you were getting at, Ms. Padgett, Ms. Picard. Two P's, Padgett and Picard. Got to make sure I keep them straight. I think we're all, for our town to be thought of as a place for, down at 70th and France, somebody wants to spend $250 million putting in improved land use projects is flattering, and this is as well. And there's just, things to think through here. I think it's a fair statement that you should take another look at what Mick Johnson has written, but I don't consider Mick Johnson to be Moses. He's not pronouncing or providing me with the 10 Commandments. It's his interpretation of what those design guidelines say, and I don't always agree with him on that. So I'm not saying you necessarily have an ally in me, but I'm telling you that I don't accept his word as gospel. He's got his own view of the world. So that's it for me. Anybody else? Okay, good.
We
Thanks
really
for being here
appreciate
tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Things to think through. You know that.
Yep,
Well, I had one other question. Is there anything that happened at the Planning Commission that you had a difficulty responding to? What do you think was the toughest thing that you had to, that you went away thinking you had to work on because of the experience at the Planning Commission?
I think we've addressed a lot of it tonight. It's some of the design guideline interpretations of how we really brought that into our project. I think we have some studies to do on that.
I would say the vast majority of the feedback that we got was helpful. I thought it was great. I thought there were even some of the constructive criticism was good. It gave us something to think about. We've been talking about it for a week now. I think the AFO report, I guess going back to what you were saying, and the amount of attention that it's gotten and the gravity of it and the sensationalization of some of the words that have hit the media, I think I just somewhat fundamentally disagree. I think that this is trying to be, the comp plan calls for this to be a community active center, right? Nothing is doing that more than this mixed use lifetime development. And if bringing housing supports that and then that supports other things, to me it's like, how much more outward can you get than that? So while I can understand some of the philosophies from simply an urban planning standpoint, I struggle greatly with how that balances out from the economic development standpoint and what a project of this scale and gravitas could do for the city of Edina, particularly in a mall development, right? We're talking about not master planning, but setting guidelines for a privately owned mall development, right? I mean, all of this land is owned by a single partnership, and when you think about that, it's very difficult to project out. You know, you were asking, well, what could be next, and my mind's gone there. I'm excited about the idea of like what comes after this. You know, is this setting the stage for great variances? That's a valid question. I think what it's really going to do is it's just going to make people want to be here, and I think that's what's going to make, you know, some of the other development opportunities pop up for Simon to consider, and that's what's going to start creating the reciprocation of this. Development of the Southdale Mall it's been chipped away at the perimeter, right? And now you're talking about introducing a grid, and you've got a diagonal building that we have to respond to, and you've got a ring road, and you've got traffic issues, and you've got all of these things working against it, and all you can do is chip away at it piece by piece by piece. And I think it would be really easy to say that this doesn't fit perfectly into the design guidelines because it's bigger, right? It's much bigger than what they're talking about, but it starts the idea of breaking this into pieces, creating that orthogonal grid to the roadway. Maybe we abolish the ring road altogether at some point in the future. It starts to break things up and create green space. Like, I think that there is going to create an appetite for being around this, and then it's just going to spread. And I think then that's going to give Simon food for thought as these opportunities pop up. And so to me, I have a hard time. That was the only thing that I had a hard time addressing in Planning Commission, because while I agree with some of the things in it, it's very difficult to respond to that without talking about all the great things that this is providing that weren't addressed in that report or represented at all. So.
Yeah, I'm empathetic personally to the challenges that you faced working on an 80-acre piece of property with all the things on it that you described.
Yeah.
It's really a challenge. And,
yeah.
and to use as your model, which we did, a street construction from Portland, Oregon that's 200 years old on a 200-foot by 200-foot grid pattern isn't going to work everywhere. And on a piece of property that's owned by a single entity that's owns all 80 acres, where they have been chipping away at the corners, and now this is kind of the first significant interior move following your entree with that wonderful building of Lifetime Fitness and Lifetime Work. Things are changing out there, and this is the first time we've seen any green space on that 80-acre site. First time ever.
It's really the first time you're seeing a housing development commit something back to the community as opposed to be very private for their own purposes, right? So it's different in that sense.
Yeah, just to expand, I don't think, this notion of the design experience guidelines versus a master plan, I think that's what we were trying to, I don't think we wanted to be too prescriptive. And so I'd encourage you, as you're noodling on what Mick Johnson's commentary was, to look to the big picture of the design guidelines, open the aperture wider and see where this fits in terms of the whole Southdale area, because it is, you're in the scale that you could influence the general direction of this whole north side of the Southdale area. And so I think you're talking about it the right way and thinking about it the right way, and so we'll just have to see where it goes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a good wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I don't think we've had any correspondence come in. Clerk Allison? No.
When she says, yep, there's a whole bunch of
Yeah, I know you're going to be shocked. I'm going to say, we'll pass them to Member Staunton and let them take a look at them and tell us what's relevant. And now we're on to manager's comments.
Thank you, Your Honor. The only thing I'd like to add tonight, I didn't make this an agenda item under my report, but just as to report to you that we are about to make a fundamental change in how we process homesteading requests from homeowners in Edina. We are in Hennepin County about to make this change across the county for all cities in Hennepin County. The county is taking back control over that process. It used to be that cities had a choice to do it or to defer it to the county. The Hennepin County Assessor's Office went through a process of having some amendments made to state statute that would allow them to have the kind of the controlling interest in that function, and they have asserted it, and so that's why we are making that change. The change will be made throughout the fall and in different cities on different dates. We think that change happens in Edina sometime around the end of August, but that's not firm at this point. We'll share more information with you as it develops.
Good, thank you. Member Anderson, anything? Anything happened in the last 3 weeks that you can remember?
Well, nothing I can remember. But I'm the leadoff man tonight, which I like. Tonight, I should check with Member Staunton on this. Tonight's an all-star game, isn't it? It is. And so I just wanted to report a couple of things.
You got drafted?
Not yet. No, I'm hoping.
Byron Buxton home run.
You know, maybe. But we have an 11-year-old AAA traveling team in EBA. I've never seen one of their games, and I don't know much about them other than this group of kids has now won 2 state tournaments back-to-back in successive years. That's never been done in our town by any group of kids. So keep your eye on them, because it looks like they'll be coming along and doing some big stuff. And the other piece of summer wistfulness I have is that the corner of right by the golf course of Gleason Road, which is Dewey Hill on one side and Hillary Lane on the other, is kind of a mecca for lemonade stands. There's a lot of kids out there, and the cast changes from time to time. But anytime I drive by there, I think, you know what, it's just interesting to see it. And there's always a mom or two hanging in the background, and the kids are here. But the other day, there was a fire truck that pulled up, and the firefighters all got out, and they were all buying lemonade from these kids. I thought, I need to get a picture of this, because that should go on the Edina calendar somewhere, and it was touching. So I wanted to pass that on, because it's in many ways we're a small town, and that's one of them. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Member Staunton.
Well, I wanted to ask Director Milner if he could give us some, I think we've all gotten some correspondence about some tree removal associated with the Blake Interlochen roundabout stuff. And so I wanted Mr. Milner to give us kind of an overview of what's happening there, because that was a project we spent a lot of time on, and I know that that's a terribly difficult pedestrian and bicycle intersection, and I think the plan had a lot of good things in it, and I know now we're down to the implementation, and so there's a bunch of dust stirring about in our email inboxes, and so I thought it might be helpful if Chad could give us a sense of what's happening there.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor, members of the council, just give you a little update on the Blake Road project. So you guys have been receiving some feedback from people that don't live on the corridor, so they have not been part of the process. It's surprising when I look at the addresses of some of these individuals. They're all over the city, and they've received some information, and they're trying to get you to open this up for more discussion. So just to orientate yourself, again, this is the Blake Road project, starts at the border of Hopkins, runs down the Shriver Road. Blake Road was the green arrows, orange is Interlochen, goes across the land bridge, which we circled in red. And this is the portion of the project where a lot of the comments are coming. So it's the south 2/3, or it's really the area from that roundabout south, that corridor along the lake. And here's a picture of what that looks like. It's got that existing guardrail. There's walls on one side and the lake, and it drops down fast. So
this is looking north on Blake Road?
From Oak Bend Road.
Okay.
Yep. So you can see some of the trees, lots of shrubs, volunteer stuff, buckthorn. There is some substantial trees in that area adjacent to the lake. Here's looking the other direction to the south, and you'll notice those overhead power lines. Again, some substantial trees, but mostly small volunteer shrubs and buckthorn on both sides of the street. If you notice the wall on the right-hand side, that goes down, it ends, and all of a sudden it starts again, and you can't even see it in some of the areas. It's so overgrown, but it is falling down and at the end of its life. So just to replace the wall, there is some removals that need to occur for the wall. But I'll kind of step through these points real quickly and then answer any questions you have. So there's been some discussion in those emails about permitting. Should we do an environmental impact statements and EAWs? And we've done more permitting on this project than we do on most because of the lake. The DNR's approved the project, the MPCA and 2 watersheds have gotten their eyes on it. We've done iterations with these folks to get the permits. Our footprints were much larger, and now we've met all their permitting requirements. From an automobile, travel lane, pedestrian, and bike facilities, the current roadway is 30 to 36 feet for all modes of transportation. So I was out there today with my head on a swivel just trying to walk up and down that area right along the lake, worried about cars coming around the corner and sight lines aren't good. So we're looking to design the automobile lanes as narrow as possible, between 20 and 22 feet wide. An 8-foot shared use trail starts at the land bridge but heads north, and we're going to make those adjustments and save all the trees heading up towards Hopkins like we discussed with this body. 5-foot bike lane, on-street bike lanes for the entire corridor. That's a foot narrower than what we initially designed and was recommended for this volume of traffic. And then 5 and 6 foot wide sidewalks basically from the land bridge south. Again, we would prefer 6 feet for our machinery, but we got 5-foot ones just to, again, save as many trees as possible. So it's really trying to balance all these things. And this really aligns with our bike ped master plan, our living streets plan, and it still meets state aid standards. So we're able to balance all those different things.
I was just going to ask Chad, but the automobile lanes 20 to 20 feet, you mean both lanes? 2 lanes, yeah, and I'll show that on this graphic right here. So the drive lanes are 11 foot most of the time. We have gone down to 10, so those numbers on the bottom of the graphic are what we did to save the trees at the south end. There's some nice oak trees on both sides of the street, and we're just trying to fit this in right at the end there for those substantial oak trees. So 10-foot lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, and then going with the 5-foot sidewalk. Again, it aligns with the bike ped master plan, and recall this has that twin loops facility that we want to go right through this area. So again, we want to build those facilities as well as we can when we have the opportunity. The roundabout, safer for pedestrians and motorists, improve operations, reduces the queuing, less idling, less GHG gas emissions, and it reduces speeds. From a stormwater and an erosion standpoint, we are adding an underground treatment facility at that intersection when it's not even required. The sheet pile wall reduces our project footprint, which I'll show you a graphic, and it reduces erosion of that shoreline of the lake. So both of those things all have clean water benefits. And again, those permitting iterations with those permitting agencies really reduce the footprint, but we're still providing the necessary treatment and narrowing up that footprint of the project. What people have been seeing recently is all the private utility infrastructure. CenterPoint had the high-pressure gas main, that's complete. Their distribution system replacements were just completed last week. Xcel Energy is really the one that's been impacting us the most. We submitted our plans and draft ideas for the project in January. They're supposed to be out of the way in 6 months. They're just getting started next week. So I'll talk cost and schedule here in a little bit, but they're starting next week. To bury the overhead power, there's no room for them. When you look at that photo I showed you, the power lines are right there. If we asked them to move those overhead, they would move them up into the right-of-way adjacent to the homes and take all those trees down. So instead, we're going to pay to bury those power along this corridor because there's no room for it. And there'd be much less tree removals. Underground is more resilient to storms, and it removes the need to trim the trees on occasions. We've seen Xcel come in too and just take the tops off the trees. So on these photos, you can see we're getting pretty close to that happening along this corridor. Here's another thing we did. We cantilevered the sidewalk out over that sheet pile wall, so we again reduced those footprints and balanced and made space for what we need to do. Tree removals. Here's the piece that we've been talking about, or that you've been getting notified. There is 35 large trees, mostly along that lake side. They're all different varieties.
Are they on the west side primarily?
They're mostly on the east side along the lake.
Mostly on the east side.
But there is some on the west. There's a couple oaks, there's a couple maples, a couple pine trees, but then there's box elder, cottonwoods, ash trees, so there's a whole variety of trees. We are working with the landscape architect with WSB right now to do 1-to-1 replacements, if not more, on the opposite side of the road where they really want to screen their home. So the lake will be much more visible. We'll be taking the majority of those for those walls, but adding more trees on that west side. We're giving more trees to owners that have dedicated easements for the project to do the landscaping along that private street. Again, all varieties. I think we showed in the photos a lot of small buckthorn type invasives, volunteer trees. Resident interactions. I've personally met with every resident on that south corridor at least once, except for one property that Aaron Ditzler, our assistant city engineer, has been meeting with. So I met with 3 others today, and it's probably been the 6th, 7th, 8th time I met with people. So the interactions you're getting from these letters are not people that live there. We've discussed the details and the impacts. I've even suggested easements to move that wall further out in the lake. There's actually 2 private PIDs out in the lake. At first I got some good feedback, and then they wanted some high payment for that easements, and we said, sorry, we don't do that as a city. We usually look for donations and work for in-kind replacements of trees and landscaping. So then the project got moved 5 feet further in because they weren't willing to work with us on those easements. So we tried to limit it again, but it just wasn't possible. Our schedule and costs, like I said, Excel really delayed us on this project. We're only going to be able to do the north third this year. They're going to start that north portion in August. It'll be done in November. The south portion is going to start from Waterman Avenue through Shriver in 2023. We want all the private utilities complete this year, so they're out there trying to finish all that work. We are going to incur some extra costs because the contract completion date was this year. I'm working with the low bidder right now and the contractor to determine how much those are, but we don't anticipate any changes to assessments. And then we know there's also requests to add additional bike lane a little bit to the east of this project. So we're looking at that. I'm concerned with the space, whether we're going to need easements from now property owners that we've had no discussions with. And I'm concerned from a permitting standpoint along the lake. So I think I want to review that first and then come back and let the council know whether or not that's just feasible from an installation standpoint. I think we can find the money to do it, but if it starts to impact permitting and stuff like that, I'd be concerned. So that's kind of the general overview. I think it addresses many of the comments you're seeing in those letters, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you'd have at this time.
Yeah, thanks, Director Milner. Member Sutton, thanks for asking Director Milner to do this.
Yeah, I don't have any other questions. I just think this is such a challenging project, and you guys are threading the needle and balancing all kinds of different things, and I appreciate you going through the details here so that people can get caught up who may not have been following along the whole time.
Thank you. Anything else on a personal basis, or?
Well, the only thing I'll share is that our family lost a member this last week. Our dog Cooper died after almost 16 years with us, and we'll miss him dearly. And he's up in doggy heaven. There's a new sheriff in doggy heaven and lots of bones to bury. So,
thank you. Member Pierce, can you top that dog story?
I cannot. No comments from me.
Well, the thought was on the 4th of July parade and the activities we had around it with the Veterans Dinner on Saturday night, the 2nd, and St. Peter's Lutheran was good enough to be the sponsor of that, and as well as I think Dave Anderson's Southern Barbecue provided a lot of the food. Wasn't quite as strong a turnout as we've normally had at Braemar. I don't know what it was, but still a pretty good group of folks, maybe around 100. And then we had I don't know if, I assume a lot of people in our town know this, but when Afghan refugees started coming into the Twin Cities, and there's about 1,900 of them here now, the Rotary clubs in Edina have started working with our school district to give them a place to meet. So every 2 weeks, they've been meeting over in one of the school district buildings, Community Center, Southview Middle School, and if you went over there on a Saturday morning, there might be 100, 150 people there getting information about job opportunities or English as a second language or how to get a driver's license and how to use transit. And we had Minnesota Valley Transit there one Saturday. We had Metro Transit there. We had Southwest Transit. And, everybody organizationally has been really cooperative. So on the night of the Vets Dinner, we had I asked somebody that was really been integrally involved with this, I said, why don't you find a few Afghan refugees that helped our troops and have them come to the vets dinner, and they did. Two gentlemen, one named Shah, one named Saeed, and Shah had been on 500 Special Forces missions as a combat interpreter. And here he is, his family's here. He lives up in the north suburbs and works for the Council of Churches. And then Saeed lives in Richfield with his family of 5. And he was a landmine removal and IED discoverer and removal expert. And it's extraordinary. Over 10 years, these guys were doing this kind of work. And they got their families out. And so I asked them if they wanted to ride in the parade or go to the parade. I thought maybe they'd want to ride with some of the vets. And they got over here, and Tom Olson, who drives this lilac-colored Cadillac from 1962 that we ride in, they decided they wanted to ride with me. So I was, we were going down the parade route, and then I'd holler, "These guys are from Afghanistan." They helped our troops, and then everybody would clap, and then you'd get a little further along, and people would look at him and think, who are these guys with the mayor? And his wife sitting up in the front seat, and then it had rained hard. Her hair was all wet. Anyway, they really enjoyed themselves, and it was a nice way to kind of celebrate them, and they seemed like they were getting in the groove of living in America, and so it was a good morning. So that's it for me. Anybody else that prompt any other thoughts from folks? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And we got a motion and a second to adjourn. Motion by Member Pierce, second by Member Anderson to adjourn the meeting of City Council, and we're going to reconvene on Thursday morning as the HRA. Is that correct? All right. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned.
Bingo.